Hey, this is Samuel Peralta. And
this is Justin Sloan.
This is Sarah Nofke.
This is M.A. Phipps, and you're listening to
30-minute author interviews
with Preston Lay.
Woohoo! Hey everybody, welcome to this episode of 30-minute author interviews. We have an amazing giveaway with this podcast episode, but first let me tell you about two of our sponsors. First up is Cereal Box. Cereal Box delivers exciting episodes of ongoing stories straight to your device every Wednesday. They bring everything that's awesome about TV to what's already cool about books with addicting serials you can take with you on the go. All of their episodes are available in text and audio, and their sleek app makes reading easier than ever. They have a range of titles from gritty urban thrillers to sexy sword-fighting fantasies and everything in between. Season 2 of The Witch Who Came In From the Cold just started up. The Witch Who Came In From the Cold. All the subterfuge of the Americans with a dark dose of magic. Head on over to cerealbox.com where you can read and listen to it now. And of course, the first episode of Season 1 is free, so you can check it out there. cerealbox.com, SERIALBOX.com. Our second sponsor this week is the Galactic Satori Chronicles, written by Nick Breaker and Paul E. Hicks. A thirst for revenge sends one man on a deadly journey through the galaxy in this adrenaline-pumping new series. Asher is a young man whose world is turned upside down when he discovers that his fiance's death has been directly caused by an imminent alien invasion. In a desire to better understand humans in order to destroy them, these aliens are projecting their consciousness into unsuspecting men and women, and in the process are learning exactly how to use humanity's own selfishness and greed as weapons against them. Fueled by emotions that the aliens will never understand, Asher bands together with a group of friends. These four MIT co-eds are more than meets the eye and go to battle with those who are intent on destroying our planet. Asher takes the fight from Earth to an alien spaceship and then to the very planet of the enemy trying to destroy them. Galactic Satori Chronicles can be found on Amazon, where Book 1 Earth and Book 2 Kron are only 99 cents. If you'd like to learn more about either one of our sponsors, head on over to Leigendarium.com and check out the show notes. We'll have links to both of our sponsors so you can check them out. And now for that giveaway I told you about. In this episode, our guest is Ian Tregillis, and Ian Tregillis and Cereal Box have combined to give one reader an amazing giveaway. Ian Tregillis is going to give one winner a signed copy of every book in the Alchemy Wars series, and Cereal Box is going to give that winner Season 1 of The Witch Who Came In From the Cold. All you need to do is listen for what book by Tim Powers did Ian read before he went to Australia. Then head on over to the show notes and leave your answer in the comments section. It's now time for our interview with Ian Tregillis. Welcome everybody to this week's episode of 30-Minute Author Interviews. This week our guest is Ian Tregillis. Thank you for taking time out of your day and coming on. We appreciate it.
Oh, you're very welcome. Thanks for having me. I've been looking forward to this.
Yeah, I have too. This has been marked and circled on my calendar, so I'm excited for this one. So we start out each podcast on kind of a little fun thing I like to do called Two Truths and a Lie, where you'll tell me two truths and a lie about yourself. I will probably get it wrong because that seems to be the trend right now. But do you have two truths and a lie about yourself that I can try to get?
Yes, I do. Okay. Okay. In no particular order. Number one, I was once spat upon by a clown. Number two, I was once caught in a ghost trap. And number three, I was once thrown out of a party by a sock puppet.
Wow. Yeah, I don't think I'm going to get this one right at all. So,
they're all
they're entertaining.
I was gonna say they're all true, but obviously they're not. Two of them are true.
All right, so run them by me one more time.
Sure thing. In no particular order. Number 1, I was once spat upon by a clown. Number 2, I was once caught in a ghost trap. And number 3, I was once thrown out of a party by a sock puppet.
All right, I'm hoping the ghost trap is true because I want to. If it's true, it would be such a cool story. And clowns can be jerks, so, but not all of them are. Getting thrown out of a party by a sock puppet would be a pretty funny story. So I'm going to say the two that are true are getting thrown out of a party by a sock puppet. Just because I hope so, because that would be such a cool story. I'm going to say that one's true also. So I'm going to say the lie is you got spat upon by a clown.
Oh, great job. Man,
really?
I thought I was going to trick you.
I was hoping for good stories.
Boy, I thought by making the lie the most mundane of the three, the most mundane and plausible of the three, but you saw right through me. Yeah. So I've never had a bad interaction with a clown. So if there are any clowns listening, I apologize.
Can you tell us the story behind your two truths, just because they sound very interesting and there has to be a good story with them?
Sure. Yeah. I'll try to keep them brief. So the sock puppet, that was quite a few years ago when I was in college. I had been invited by some friends to go to I think it was a Christmas party with what they told me was a white elephant gift exchange, even less than a white elephant gift exchange. And I said, is there a price limit? Do I need to go buy something at the drugstore? Can I just make something? And they told me, oh, no, don't worry. It's all for fun. They're joke gifts. You could, if you wanted, you could make a sock puppet for someone and bring it. And I said, okay, great. That's what I'll do. I can't really sew, but I can stick 2 buttons on a sock. No problem. So I do that. We get to the party, and it was a party run by some group of people I didn't know. It was like an organization that my friends belonged to. I get there, and sure enough, like the gift table, there are like big boxes that are gift wrapped. This is obviously not a white elephant gift exchange at all. So I walk up to and I saw the writing on the wall. So I threw my sock with the eyes on it on this table. And then as other people came into the party, checking out the gift table before the big event, I could hear people going, oh my God, why is there a sock on this table? So, long story short, that escalated pretty quickly, and someone actually took the sock, put it on his hand, and physically pushed me out of the door.
That's funny.
Yeah, I was pretty bitter about that. I feel like the whole event had been misrepresented to me.
Right.
Yeah, boy, it's been a long time since I thought about that, but yeah, I've suppressed the memory.
That's funny.
And then the ghost trap happened to me about 6 years ago when I was on a vacation in Australia, and I'm a big fan of the books of Tim Powers, who is I think one of the greatest fantasists living today, and he has this great power of creating magic systems and describing magic in the everyday world in a way that sounds very, very plausible when he explains it. Things that otherwise would seem ridiculous. When they come out of Tim Powers, you say, oh yeah, of course magic would work that way. So right before my trip to Australia, I had read his book Expiration Date, which has to do with ghosts and people trapping ghosts and collecting ghosts and even sort of using sort of almost snorting ghosts as drugs. It's a very strange but entertaining book. So in it, he has this sort of elaborate mythology of how you trap a ghost. And among other things, it involves palindromes. The claim is that ghosts are sort of attracted to palindromes, and that anything really fiddly will sort of capture their attention. So people will write a palindrome on a wall and then scatter some loose change underneath it. Those two things being things that ghosts are attracted to, right? Mm-hmm. So I'm in Australia, and I'm sitting in a tram stop in a suburb outside of Adelaide, waiting for the tram to come by and take me to the beach. And I look up at the sign, and I notice that the name of the stop where I'm sitting is Glenelg, Glenelg, which is a palindrome. So I turned to my traveling companion, who had lent me her copy of Expiration Date just before the trip. So we'd been talking about Tim Powers, and we'd been talking about ghost traps. So it wasn't a non sequitur when I said, "Hey, look at that, Glenelg. That's a palindrome. Good thing we're not ghosts." Ha ha ha. Right? Really, really lame joke, right? But here's the thing, and I swear this is true. My hand to God. At that moment, I look down at the bench between us, and there's loose change scattered between us. And I say, "Oh, hey, I think there's a hole in your pocket because you're losing all your change." And I reach down to pick them up, and I try to pick them up, and I keep trying, and I keep trying. And then I realize that the coins were glued to the bench, just like in a Tim Powers novel. And there was that moment when all the gears in my mind came to a screeching halt, because for a split second, I honestly did not know if I'd somehow fallen into a book. I didn't know what was real. I didn't know if I was dreaming. It was one of the most surreal things that had ever happened to me.
Wow, that's I'm gonna have to add that book to my to be read list or stack.
Oh, it's
that
great.
I have.
Yeah, it's a great book, but be careful when you read it, because strange things will start happening to you.
There we go. Wow, that's pretty interesting. Well, for those of our listeners that might not know who you are or what you do, why don't you kind of tell our listeners who you are and what you do?
Okay, my name is Ian Tregillis. I have kind of a double life. In one of my lives, I'm a novelist and short story writer. I'm the author of 7 novels, an alternate history World War II, Cold War trilogy called the Milkweed Triptych, and then I wrote sort of Raymond Chandler pastiche noir mystery set in Thomas Aquinas' vision of heaven called Something More Than Night. And most recently, I finished the Alchemy Wars trilogy, which is basically steampunk robots in an alternate 1920s, and conversations about free will and spies and explosions. That's one of my lives. And then in my other life, I'm a physicist at Los Alamos National Laboratory.
Oh, wow. That's interesting. So one of the reasons we have you on here today is to talk about The Witch Who Came In From the Cold from Cereal Box. They reached out to the podcast to promote the show. So how did you find out about Cereal Box, and how did you get involved in the project The Witch Who Came In From the Cold?
Sheer dumb luck, which is really a recurring theme in my writing career. I always tell people it's better to be lucky than good. Right when they were ramping up, when they were preparing their various projects at Cereal Box, Julian Yap, one of the founders at Cereal Box, emailed me out of the blue and said, "Hey, this is who we are. This is who I am. This is what we want to do. One of our projects is a story about spies and magic and espionage and sort of Cold War history. Would you be interested in maybe participating?" And of course, based on what I just told you, you could probably tell that a story like The Witch Who Came In From the Cold presses all of my buttons. These are all the things that I love.
Right.
So, yeah, I swallowed the hook right away.
So there are a total of, is it 5 authors each season writing in this world? How is your writing process different in this series from when you are writing just one of your own novels?
So definitely in Cereal Box, there's a lot. If I'm working on my own novel, I have the luxury of going backwards and forwards and making sure that I have everything locked down in my head before I begin. The world, the characters, the rules of the world, and so on and so forth. Sort of major details of the plot. And when you're writing a novel, you have the luxury to go backwards and forwards. You figure out something late in the book, and then you can go back and weave it in and with foreshadowing. It's much, much harder to do that when we're writing episodically. So we really, truly have to work as a team and communicate with one another and make sure that we're all on the same page. And that's not a bad thing at all. That actually is an enjoyable challenge. I also like the fact that unlike when I'm working alone on one of my own projects, I can lean on the others, and I can rely on Cassie and her better understanding of a particular character to help me along. I can hopefully help others if they're having trouble with a particular plot point or a particular character. I can find an interesting piece of research and share it with the team and get people excited about figuring out how to put some world building detail into the season. So there's a lot more give and take. That and of course we all get to share the blame when we're not happy with something. Whereas when you're writing your own novel, it's all on you when things go wrong.
Yeah. So as we said, it's actually 6 authors this season. You've got Lindsay Smith, Max Gladstone, Cassandra Rose Clark, you, Michael Swanwick, and then Fran Wild. All
actually just 5 this season.
Oh, is it just 5?
Yeah. So 13 episodes in season 1 and season 2, and what we do is 4 of us, me, Max, Lindsay, and Cassandra, each write 3 episodes, and then that leaves 1 extra. So every season we have sort of a guest.
Oh, okay.
For season 1's guest was Michael Swanwick, and Fran was our guest this season.
Oh, okay.
So just for clarification.
There we go. So Michael was the guest in season 1. Gotcha. Had you met any of these authors before working on this project, or was this kind of your first time meeting and getting to work with the authors on this project?
This was my first time getting to know all of them, including Michael and Fran. We had never met until we got together for a face-to-face meeting before season 1, and I'm glad to say that we all get along pretty well, and I quite like the team. So it was easy getting to know them. But no, it was they were all unknown quantities to me, at least in terms of who they were. I knew them by their books. But.
Right. Now. In the episodes you write, are there any Easter eggs in your episodes that people might recognize from any of your other stories, or did you leave this alone and this is its own thing?
Easter eggs. I don't know if this counts as an Easter egg. I will confess that I have plagiarized from myself very particular turns of phrase. Every once in a while, and not frequently, but every once in a while, I'll be working on a Cold Witch episode and find myself sort of struggling or grasping for just the right thing to say, or sometimes just as a placeholder until I can come back and fix it as I revise. And sometimes a phrase or a sentence that I wrote in a book 3 or 4 years previously will pop into my head, and I'll say, "Oh yeah, that'll work." And I figure since I'm taking it from myself, it should be okay.
There we go. That's funny.
Man, a reader would have to really be paying attention to catch something like that.
Oh, okay. That's funny. Which episodes are going to be your stories in season 2? Do you know yet?
Yes. So in season 2, I wrote episodes 3, 9, and episode 13, which is the season finale.
Oh, wow. Okay. So episode 3, let's see. We're recording this on March 4th. It's coming out hopefully on March 10th. So episode 3 would have just come out on Wednesday. Is that right?
Yes. This past Wednesday or the week before.
Yeah.
Well, isn't it embarrassing that I can't even remember?
Because I know they didn't release one this week. They were doing some server upgrades. Right. Yeah. So unfortunately, Cassie's episode got pushed back a week. Okay.
No fault of her own. Some internet thing.
There we go. Yes. Cereal boxes. We've talked about this a little bit with Fran. I love what Cereal Box is doing. It's such an awesome deal for your money. For those listening that might not know, as you can tell, The Witch Who Came In From the Cold is done in 13 episodes. They're on season 2 right now. And there's an episode that comes out every Wednesday. And each episode, not only do you get an ebook, you also get the audio book to go with it. They have an app for iOS, and I know they're working on an app for Androids, but you can also download it on your computer. And if you sign up for the season, it's $1.59 per episode. So for $1.59, not only are you getting an ebook, you're also getting an audio book, which is a tremendous deal because the audio book is very well done. it's very high quality production. So it's definitely something to check out. So hopefully everybody will go over to serialbox.com or links in the show notes over at Leigendarium.com to check out The Witch Who Came In From the Cold, because it's such an awesome project, and they have other stories as well, other serials going on. So definitely head over and check those out. Why I have you on, I wanted to talk to you about one of your series that you mentioned. I want to talk about your book, The Mechanical, and the series, The Alchemy Wars. So before we kind of jump into that series and book, can you let the readers know kind of the non-spoiler book blurb on what that series is about?
Sure. The premise of the first book, The Mechanical, is that, well, the premise of the series is that sometime in the late 1600s, scientists and alchemists, and clockmakers in the Netherlands, sort of during the peak of the Dutch Golden Age, found a way to meld clockmaking and alchemy so that they could make a mechanical man called a clacker, conventionally known as a clacker. Basically, a humanoid made of clock pieces that is somehow magically shackled to human will. So an immortal superhuman servant that is shackled to the will of its masters, unable to ever express its own free will. And this was right around the time when the Netherlands were at war with other continental powers. They very quickly started building an army of these things, and very rapidly after that sort of took over Europe and became the world's sole superpower. At that time, the French court fled. They abandoned Paris, fled across the ocean, and settled in what at the time was known as New France, basically the French colonies in what we would call Canada and North America. That's sort of the backstory. And then the story in The Mechanical, the first book, picks up 250 years later in this radically changed world where the Netherlands are the world's only superpower, built on the backs of legions of mechanical men.
I remember the first time I saw this book, I'd never heard of you before. I'd gone into Barnes & Noble. I was going to pick up the two novels and the short story and Patrick Rothfuss's The Kingkiller Chronicles. And I always have a habit of when I go into a bookstore to get a book or a couple that I know I'm getting, I walk through the entire section just to see what I can discover, what I haven't seen, what's going to grab my attention. And, you know, I'm scrolling through, start at the A's, and I'm working my way through the science fiction section. And all of a sudden, I see your cover for The Mechanical, which is, for those that haven't seen it, I'll put it up in the show notes for the podcast over at Leigendarium.com. It's a red cover with kind of a silhouette of a white silhouette of a man with a cog in its head, and it just says The Mechanical with Ian Tregillis on it. And it's very simple, and it's a very simple and plain cover, but it just grabs you. And I remember the cover just stuck with me, and every time I go into a bookstore, I would try to find it, and I couldn't find it for a while. Did you have any say in the concept of that cover? Did you get to work closely with the cover artist to come up with that?
No, that is all to the credit of the people at Orbit. They know what they are doing, and it's far, far better than anything I ever would have devised. And I think they really knocked it out of the park. All of the covers in that series are they work so well together, and they found a uniting theme. And yeah, the red cover just really pops. I fell in love with it the second they showed it to me.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, I saw it, and I never forgot it after I saw it until I finally bought it. Yeah, it sticks with you when you see it. Do you remember where your idea for the book or for the series came from?
I do. It grew. This series grew out of a short story that I wrote for an anthology. Several years previously, I was contributing to an anthology called Human for a Day, the theme of the anthology being pretty much what it sounds like. And I decided that I wanted to write a story about a mechanical man, maybe searching for its creator, or searching for a locksmith that could pick the lock on its own soul so it could be free. And I knew that was a good idea for a story, but I needed a setting. So I was sort of brainstorming for what kind of world would this story take place in. And I had this idea about the Netherlands sort of melding alchemy with clockmaking during their golden age. And it's one of the very few times in my writing career where an entire world, just in an instant, I had a whole world in my head. And I knew that the concept was too big for just one short story. But I wrote the short story for the anthology, and I kept that world in the back of my head, knowing that someday I would come back to it. And when the time was right, I sort of mentioned it to my agent, and she got very excited about it. And as is often the case, I intend to write one book, but I have an idea that's too big. And this idea that was too big for a short story turned out to be too big for one book, and that's how it became a trilogy. Okay.
Now, when you set out to write this series, did you always know you wanted to write it in the setting of the 1920s, or did that just kind of just happen?
The 1920s came about because when I sort of worked through the backstory in more detail, when I knew I was going to write a book in this world, it turned out that the best time to put this radical change to history, that is to say the invention of the clacker, right around between 1670 and 1680, let's say 1675 or 1676 is I think what I eventually landed on. So the mid-1920s was just a nice round number, 250 years from the invention of the clacker. Or 250 years gives us enough time for the world to have been radically changed before the story begins, right? Because I'm a big believer in starting the story at the last possible moment.
Mm-hmm. Now, how much research did you have to do to look at historical things that have happened in history, and then looking at the 20s? Did you have to do a bunch of research to make sure that you were able to get the time frames right, or the different time periods?
Oh, yes. Yes, indeed. I don't know why, because I keep having ideas that sort of brush up against alternate history, or ideas that demand a lot of historical research, because I am not a historian, and I did not study history when I was a student. I don't have a background in it. Somehow I keep coming up with ideas that require a lot of research in that direction, and that's very challenging for me. I do my best to try to get the details right, or to give myself enough of a grounding that I can then pretend to do a plausible extrapolation, as history takes a different course. But the Alchemy Wars books were particularly difficult because of that 250-year gap that I just mentioned. That 250 years is a long time for things to change. If you're writing, say, an alternate World War II, and your story actually takes place during the war, the lever arm for changing history isn't necessarily that long. If you change something in 1941, we're not going to have moon bases in 1942, right? If you invent sentient robots in 1675, you could have anything by 1925.
Right.
So finding the path is really difficult and required a lot of learning about not just history even, but philosophy, trying to figure out how this would have impacted entire schools of continental thought, how it would affect religion, because the sort of conflict between the Protestants and the Catholics was one of the factors in this conflict that the Netherlands and France were undergoing at the time. So I was sort of committed to trying to understand how this meteoric change to human history would affect religious thinking and philosophical thinking, as well as trying to come up with, if you took the court of Louis XIV and sent it over to North America and had these people living in fear of being attacked by legions of mechanical men, living behind these high walls for hundreds of years? How would their society have evolved? How would their national mindset have evolved? So the short answer to your question is, yeah, it was a lot of research and kind of a burden.
Book 3 just came out. It's called it just came out in December. It's called the Deliberation. So the trilogy's done. But do you think you'll ever go back and revisit the world and maybe continue the story in a different way, or did Deliberation kind of end it all?
I definitely think there's room to go back and explore the world, probably in shorter forms, in short stories, in novellas. I don't have anything in mind in terms of where I would write another book in that world. I try to make my stories, whether they're a standalone novel or a trilogy, I try to make them self-contained. I really make an effort to wrap up all of the loose ends by the end. At least all the loose ends that I intend to address. So I feel like the characters in the trilogy, their stories are complete. But it's a very spiky universe. There's a lot of room for exploring various events in that 250 years that never got addressed in the trilogy.
Okay. What was the most difficult thing that you came across in writing this trilogy? What was the most difficult thing you had you came across writing it, and then how did you overcome that difficulty?
Well, I've already mentioned sort of not having the background in history and philosophy, and somehow ending up tasking myself with figuring out how they might have evolved in a different world. Mm-hmm. That was definitely very, very difficult. I would say the other real challenge with this trilogy was taking an absolutely absurd premise and trying to present it in a way that sounded halfway plausible. Because, of course, if you think about the premise for 2 seconds, there's absolutely no way that you could build a mechanical man in 1675 that can think and act and talk. It's ridiculous. So obviously the story has to lean on magic pretty heavily to make that work, which is fine. I mean, it's a fantasy novel, and magic is a very convenient rug for sort of sweeping leaves underneath. The trick is sweeping all of the inconvenient questions under the rug and then finding a way to very subtly nail down the rug so that readers can't pry it back up and look at all the dirty secrets underneath. That was particularly difficult in this world because, like I say, the sheer absurdity of the premise prompts so many very reasonable questions from readers. Mm-hmm. How do clackers work? How do they think? How can they do this? How can they do that? And obviously the answer to all of those questions is either shut up or, oh my God, look behind you. I'm not kidding. There's really something behind you.
That's funny. Did you have a hard time getting people to connect with a clacker and kind of feel the emotions they were feeling? Was it any different than when you write human characters?
That's a good question. I have to say, to my surprise, no. I think I found it much harder as the writer to connect with the main clacker point of view, a character named Jax, than readers seem to. I was much more interested in other characters in the world, but I knew that the story required we had to see the world through the eyes of one of the mechanicals and follow that mechanical all through all 3 books. So I spent a lot of time thinking about who that mechanical person would be and what his arc would be. But he's there because the story demands his presence. And to me, that's less interesting. There are other characters that I found much more fun to write. But a lot of the feedback I've gotten from readers involves Jax. People saying, I really like following Jax around. I really like him. He's the nicest of the characters. He's the most soulful of the characters. And that was really surprising to me because his almost universally, and here I'm really getting into the weeds and probably sharing things I shouldn't about the dirty, the dirty mess that is the real writing process. pretty much every one of Jax's scenes all throughout the trilogy was a slog for me to write.
Oh, really?
Because it's seeing the world through Jax's eyes that tells us the most about the fundamental crux of the world and the conflicts in this world. And so it was very hard to keep it interesting and not expository. And those were always the scenes where I was figuring out nasty little details for myself, sort of teaching myself more about the world. And that's never fun to do with the keyboard. So those scenes also took a lot of editing too, because of course I didn't want them to read like I was figuring out details of the world while I was sitting at the keyboard. The lie that you're trying to tell readers is that it's all very real and that you had it all figured out ahead of time. So poor Jax was the beast of burden most of the time.
So you said that you found other characters in the book actually were your kind of favorite. Do you have or which one of your characters was your favorite to write in scenes?
Oh, by far, Berenice. She is the spy master to the King of France, or the King of New France, I should say. She is also goes by the codename Talleyrand, and she came to me. And this is going to sound bizarre, I know, but almost in a flash. I just saw her in one particular scene. Almost the very first time we see her in the book is exactly what I envisioned, because I was thinking about this world and what kind of characters am I going to need to tell this story. And I thought, well, this is going to be a story with spies in it, and there's going to be maybe an element of industrial espionage as other governments try to steal the secrets of the clackers. And I don't know what this says about me, but I just had this vision of this woman dressed in sort of a Marie Antoinette getup with the big gown and the hair and the fake birthmark on her face and the powdered face, dangling over, like hanging from a rope, dangling from the very high wall of a fortress citadel with a torch in one hand, studying this mechanical killer that had been incapacitated but still stuck to the wall of this fortress. It's a very weird vision, but as soon as I saw that in my head, I knew exactly who this woman was. I knew that she was extremely self-confident to a degree that is almost a little self-destructive and dangerous, very intelligent, but very arrogant and reckless because of her little bit overwhelming faith in her own intelligence. And every scene I wrote with her, she just leapt off the page. She would teach me new things about her every time she walked into the room. So yeah, Berenice was a real pleasure to write.
Okay. And I have a question, So when you come up with your characters' names, do you put much thought into the names of the characters?
I do. Yeah. And the reason for that is because if you're writing a book, more so even if you're writing a trilogy, you're going to be spending a lot of time with these people, or at least in my case, because for me, it takes me about a year to write a book. So a trilogy takes 3.5 to 4 years to write once you factor in other things. That's a lot of time to spend thinking multiple times a day about some character whose name doesn't roll off your tongue or whose name sort of trips you up every time you hit it. The names have to flow with the language, and they have to fit the character. I know that sounds strange, but every character, there's a period where I go, is she named this? No, that doesn't sound right. Is she named that? No, that doesn't sound right. Berenice. Yep, that's the one. You kind of know it when you find it.
Okay. So I'm going to go in a weird direction with that question.
Okay.
I'm not very far into the mechanical. Just started it. But the rogue clacker in chapter 1, I'm not even going to try to say the name. It's a good thing that I also have the Audible to listen to if I'm driving or something. How did you come up with that rogue clacker's name in chapter 1?
Oh, I believe you're referring to Pergembella gastrovantis.
Yes.
Pergembella gastrovantis, or as he calls himself, Adam.
Adam, yep.
So true names are a recurring theme in a lot of magic systems. It's not something that I made up. That's just something you hear a lot. The power of the true name. If you know somebody's true name, you have a power over them.
Okay.
So I thought that the clackers should have very complicated true names. These are the names that they are forged with. Sort of the concept of the forging, this dread machine, this dread magical machine that makes the clackers, basically the factory that makes them, is an object of great dread for the machines because it's also the place where they can be unmade. But the forge, when it builds them, stamps a true name on their souls. And I thought, if the clackers don't have ownership of their own souls, then the true names should be very complicated. Mm-hmm. And then from a sort of industrial point of view, I decided that the number of syllables in the clackers' true names and the various syllables in various places in the name actually convey information about when they were forged and their model and their serial number and lot number and things like that.
Okay. I had to know. Well, here at the Leigendarium and with 30-minute author interviews, we like to end each podcast episode with a segment that we call the legendary ending. Now, these questions, some of them are kind of book related, but some of them kind of aren't. The first question is, what songs are currently on your writing playlist?
On my writing playlist, at the moment, I've been listening to a great deal of a band called the Broken Bells. I have 2 or 3 of their albums in my iTunes playlist right now. Can I tell you the albums?
Sure.
Sorry, I'm actually firing up iTunes to take a look. I just play them on repeat as I'm working. Actually, as I'm working on The Witch Who Came In From the Cold, I've been doing revisions on the season finale for the past couple days, and I've been listening to Broken Bells pretty much nonstop. Their first album is called, it's self-titled, Broken Bells, and then they had a very short album called Myron Fields. They came out in 2011, and then their 2013 album is called After the Disco. So I know those are albums and not songs, but basically all 3 albums on constant repeat.
What type of music are they? I've never heard of them before.
They are, well, gosh, do we trust what iTunes tells us? iTunes simply says alternative.
Okay.
But that's a pretty big bucket to throw things into. Mm-hmm. I don't even know if I would know how to describe them. A lot of different influences, but I like their music because I like their lyrics a lot. There's a soulfulness to it without being twee. Mm-hmm. And I don't know, it's just really catchy. Something that's easy to listen to and kind of goes in the background. It has a nice energy to it to keep me going without, some music can be really intrusive. Like the words really force themselves into my awareness, mm-hmm. and I can't listen to music like that when I'm writing because it interferes with my own language processing. Okay. But Broken Bells is really great writing music.
Okay, I want to check them out. Next question is, if you were stuck in a zombie apocalypse, which one of your book characters would you want to be stuck with?
If I were stuck in a zombie apocalypse, I guess it depends on how I want to get through it. My first choice would be a character named Gretel from my first trilogy, the Milkweed Triptych. And the reason I say that is because, now this might be a bit of a cheat, but bear with me. Gretel can see the future. She's a precog. And she can actually see very deep into the future to the extent that Gretel's weapon, if you will, her preferred mode of conflict is to wield the butterfly effect. She knows something is coming many years down the line. She'll just make little tiny changes that add up to the avalanche that diverts the course of history. So Gretel might be a good choice because she would be able to avert the zombie apocalypse before it even began.
Okay.
The problem with Gretel is that she is also, in addition to being able to see the future, she is also a sociopath. So a lot of the ways in which she changes history is by throwing other people under the bus. So it might turn out that her strategy for surviving the zombie apocalypse would be to throw me to the mercy of the zombies. Right. So that one might not be so good. Yeah, but maybe Gretel. Okay. Maybe Gretel.
Now, if you were stuck in a zombie apocalypse, but you could choose any character from any media source, another book, movies, comics, video games, whatever, who would you want to be stuck with and why?
Oh, if I could pick a character from anywhere, I might say Ambassador Kosh from Babylon 5. Mostly because I would love to take a ride on his spaceship.
Okay.
But again, I'm not entirely sure that the race of aliens that Ambassador Kosh comes from, the Vorlons, would really care about a zombie apocalypse on Earth. And that does make me wonder why I keep picking characters who probably aren't likely to care very much about my own personal well-being. Right. But there you have it.
There we go. I think that's a first. I've never had somebody pick somebody from Babylon 5 or Star Trek or Star Wars. It's always like Batman or Superman. So,
oh yeah, I suppose those are better choices. What does that tell you about me?
Right. If you had a time machine, where would you travel and why?
Well, my answer to that, I think, would depend a bit on the type of time machine, the form of the time machine, and its reliability. It would depend on whether the time machine was something that I could carry on my person, like something clipped to my belt at all times, or if it was something like the TARDIS, Doctor Who's TARDIS, something large that I physically had to leave behind me, and which therefore may be damaged during one of my journeys. Because I tell you, I'm not sure I'd want to get stuck in the past. But, putting that aside, assuming it's a round trip with no risk of getting stranded, I'd first go into the future. I would pop 50 years into the future, maybe 100 years, 500 years, even 1,000 years into the future. Because I would like to know where humanity is going and what kind of people we become. Mm-hmm. If we ever get off this planet, if we solve all of our problems, if we have new ones, if we have the same problems. And of course, I'd like to see all the amazing technology that's going to come along after my lifetime.
Right. And
then, if it's a guaranteed round trip with no risk of getting stranded, I wouldn't want to go too far back because I like having modern medicine at my disposal. But without question, I would go to the 1960s. I'd go watch the Apollo moon landings, which happened basically before I was born. And I'd also maybe slip over to Liverpool and catch the Beatles at the Cavern Club.
Oh, there we go. That'd be fun. If you had one superpower, what would it be and why?
I had one superpower. If I had one superpower, my wife and I talk about this a lot. We always have the flight or invisibility discussion. But my choice superpower would be neither flight nor invisibility. My superpower would be spontaneous teleportation.
Okay.
That would be great.
Why would you choose that one?
Do you want the honest answer or the entertaining answer?
Whichever you prefer.
The honest answer is because this is so prosaic, but I have my commute to work every day is about an hour and 10 minutes, so I spend 2 hours and maybe 15 minutes on the road every day.
Wow.
Man, if I could just I tell you, my life would be completely different if I could just brush my teeth, grab my lunch, and pop into my office.
That's right.
Without an hour and 10 minutes on the road in between. Oh my gosh, that would be great. I could pop home for lunch with my wife. Yeah, it would be great. And then, of course, vacations would be wonderful. I wouldn't spend all that time in line at the airport, taking my shoes off. Mm-hmm. Yeah, that would be wonderful. That would be great.
That works. Wow. I thought my 35-minute ride to work was bad enough. Man, an hour. Wow. Yeah, well,
at least I take the bus, so that's actually where I do most of my reading. Is on the bus. So it's relaxing, but it's time that I'm forced to spend every day. Okay. It's always in my day, no matter what. Mm-hmm. As much as I love to read, it would be nice to be able to do other things.
So the question we're kind of famous for here is a penguin walks through the door right now wearing a sombrero. What does he say and why is he here?
Yeah, I think I know exactly what that penguin would say.
Okay.
The penguin would waddle in, look me in the eye, and say, "Time's up, Tregillis." And he'd be here, of course, because of our taunting.
That works. And then before we leave, do you have any advice, whether it be for writing or for life, that you would like to share with the listeners?
I don't think I know how to live life well enough to be able to give people meaningful advice. But as a writer, and I think my advice for other writers is probably pretty common. It's the most important thing is doing the work and sitting down and sticking with it and persevering. And also taking comfort in the fact that while some days are easy writing days and some days are very difficult writing days, meaning that the words just don't want to flow, they don't want to cooperate. Once you've done some revision, and this is actually an observation that I read from Neil Gaiman, readers, at the end of the day, readers cannot tell which parts you wrote during the easy days and which parts you wrote during the hard days. So there's always room for fixing things in post, and I take a lot of solace in that.
That works. I think that's some great advice. Where can our listeners go if they would like to learn more about you or your stories?
I have a website, iantregillis.com, and I'm also on Twitter at @Tregillis.
Okay. We will put links to all of that in the show notes over at Leigendarium.com. And then one final question before we leave is what can your fans expect from you next?
What can they expect from me next? Well, as we discussed, I have 2 more episodes coming out this season for season 2 of The Witch Who Came In From the Cold from Cereal Box. And having just finished a trilogy, I'm now at the point in my own writing, which is my favorite part, which is the free and unfettered brainstorming. I'm starting to flirt with a new novel idea, but it'll be a while before that actually turns into a book.
Sounds good.
I like to hold my cards close to my chest when I'm formulating new ideas.
There we go. That works. Well, thank you for taking time out of your day and coming on to do 30-minute author interviews. We appreciate it.
Oh, it was my very great pleasure. This was fun. Thank you very much for having me.
Well, guys, that's all the time we've got for this episode. We hope you enjoyed it, and we hope you come back every Wednesday for a brand new episode. And head on over to Leigendarium.com and check out the show notes for this episode. That's where you'll find the giveaway, where Ian Tregillis is giving one person the chance to win a signed copy of every book in the Alchemy Wars series, and Cereal Box is going to be throwing in Season 1 of The Witch Who Came In From the Cold. All that can be found in the show notes at Leigendarium.com. You'll also find the links to our sponsors, Cereal Box and the Galactic Satori Chronicles. Go visit them by clicking on the link over in the show notes and let them know that you heard about them here on 30-Minute Author Interviews. And we'd also like to thank a few of our Patreon subscribers. We would like to thank Nick Breaker, Diane S. Loftus, Third Scribe, and Maggie Stewart Grant. They are supporting 30-Minute Author Interviews through Patreon, and they're also receiving the very special Patreon-only podcast called 10 Questions With. So visit patreon.com/legendarium and find out how you can support 30-Minute Author Interviews as well. Until next time, stay legendary. The Leigendarium 30-Minute Author Interviews. I almost had it in one take.